Underneath Your Beautiful podcast is raw and intimate, sometimes funny, and always entertaining. With new episodes every Saturday, Hara explores our loves, fears, and hopes with a delicious combination of depth and lightness. Today we interview Randi Johnson. Randi, will you tell us a little bit about yourself?
I would love to. I'm lots of things, but I'm most excited about the fact that I'm 39 and a half this month.
That's awesome. I'll be 53 and a half next month. I happen to know my half birthday.
Yes, I think that's a fun thing to know. I'm originally from Miami. I am lots of things professionally. I'm a lawyer, a soul midwife / death doula, a mom, a wife, a Peloton enthusiast. I'm an aunt, a sister, a daughter. I am a joy junkie. So I'm a business coach and consultant. And, sometimes I sleep.
Well, I want to know what a joy junkie means. And also, I want to talk about being a death doula.
A joy junkie. I've spent the last, 10 years or so exploring this idea that we don't have to get to the end of our life feeling like we didn't seek out the best in any moment. In my work and in, just personal experiences, I find that so many of us in our culture, we just sort of get stuck in this identity of places of dark, of trauma. Some of us certainly wear it as a badge of honor, but others just sort of wear it as a badge of identity. This is who I am. This is where I came from. That's who I am. And I just thought, well, if you can identify that way, certainly the opposite must be true. And wouldn't that be fun to explore? So, it's the same experiences everyone else has in these last 10 years, but I make a conscious effort to practice finding the opportunity for adventure and joy.
If one thing is true, then the opposite is also true.
Yes, then the opposite must also be true. If a problem exists, it necessarily means the solution also exists, or else it wouldn't be a problem.
Are you talking about people who have a victim mentality?
Certainly that, but I think also the opposite from a disempowered space.
I just was listening to Terry Gross on Fresh Air, and she was interviewing Riz Ahmed. He said, we don't have any control. And so if you don't have any control, then maybe everything you have is a gift. If you're not responsible for the bad things that happen, maybe you're not responsible for any of the good things or any of the things. And so, maybe everything is a gift. And that's sort of what you're saying, that you're just choosing to look at everything in a positive way. Is that right?
Right.
How did you become a death doula? What does that even mean?
Well, the path to doing this work is actually sort of woo and out there. But I had my first glimpse of that during some pregnancy dreams with my first daughter. I had about 3 repeated dreams, recurring dreams when I was pregnant with Chloe. They sort of, changed a little bit from here and there. But the overall sense from these dreams was that basically I was visited by or had some sort of connection with the angel of death. And the angel of death shouldn't be feared, but is just another being among so many other celestial beings, angelic beings. And the angel of death said, I'm going to bless you with this gift, and you get to help souls move from here to there. And I'll let you know who it is. And, you'll find the tools to do this. Don't be afraid. I really thought I was nuts. I blamed it on the hormones, but I didn't share it with anybody because, that sounds a little crazy. Fast forward 3 or 4 years later, I took a few weeks to reclaim myself. By that point, I was in my mid-30s. I had 2 small children. Between my husband and myself, we owned two little businesses as well. And, I just felt like I'd lost me for me. And so I went to Bali to go find myself. At this retreat, I met a couple of shaman and a medicine woman, and I shared the vision with them. And nonchalantly, the shaman says, "Oh, a psychopomp." And I said, "A what?" And he said, "We know how to die." In the same way that, thank goodness, there's a positive birth movement going on where women are reminded that our bodies are made for creating life and birthing life. It's the same, the positive death movement, the conscious dying movement is all about helping humankind remember that dying is not a failure to live, but a reminder that we know how to die. Nothing's wrong. To move away from a death phobic culture. It is not the worst possible thing to happen that someone should die.
So that was a vision. So, but have you now helped people?
So since then, so that was 2018. Then I spent 2019 in a pretty intensive certification training through the Conscious Dying Institute. So I'm now a certified death doula. And my particular passion within the field is supporting, in particular, mothers, women, parents who, when it's time to say goodbye to a child, and that can be an unborn, preborn, postborn child, and what that looks like for that grieving path, and how do we reclaim joy after that loss, because how we grieve really matters, and not to shame grief and not to choke in the tears and the sobs and the keening. And we need that. We need to be witnessed as people who grieve. We need to witness others and hold that container.
That's beautiful. I love that.
I was 5 when my great grandparents died. I wasn't a part of any of those services. And so to not give children a place to express their sadness, because frequently children's sadness make adults uncomfortable. And because the adults know that they don't know what to say, they just leave them out. Oh, well, they won't remember. They were very young. Or we'll just tell them that grandma went to heaven, or whatever they tell people. It makes us all as adults pretty ill-equipped.
I always say my mess is my message. Is there a past that makes this seem like exactly what you're supposed to be doing?
It's interesting because I often thought about that for myself. Like, isn't this a bizarre sort of path? I don't have a personal experience of child loss or reproductive loss. That was not my story. I think it was a combination of things. Certainly the vision kind of like, was a, hey, ding dong, go do something. But in my experience working as a disability advocate, as a disability attorney, and reading hundreds of thousands of pages of medical records in all of this time, you do come to recognize a pattern. And one of the patterns, there's many, but one of the patterns that I think I saw was that I don't think any one of us comes out of this life experience without trauma, right? So that's universal. One of the differences between individuals who just at some point could no longer pick themselves up and keep going, and people who have trauma and continue to thrive and survive and do all of those things, have at least one person who held the space, supported them, gave them a trusting environment to express their sad at some point. That gave them tools to navigate the sad and the loss throughout their lives. So I started really developing this idea of being like a defender of joy as a lawyer. The grown-ups around a child have a duty to be responsible and to, as best they can, keep small children away from situations that exceed their emotional and psychological development. Because the first thing to go when a child is burdened with those kinds of situations, first thing to go is play. I'm passionate about the need for play. That's how we practice for being adults with passion. And if you aren't a child who got to play and imagine and pretend and make things up and think about what you like and think about what you don't like and Wear silly hats. How are you going to be an adult who can think through, dream casting what you might like to do? There wasn't a space for that. You just haven't exercised that muscle. And I think the same is true with grief. My mother experienced years of infertility and reproductive loss. And there are 10 years between my sister and I. I'm sure as a combination of both the significant pain that she was experiencing and also how small I was, and it just really wasn't discussed. It was just, I came home from soccer practice and mom was in the dark room, and I just knew to give her some space. And at some point she might come out of there.
Yeah. So you do have experience with it, but it just wasn't you in particular.
Right. And so, thinking about sort of the intersection of valuing a child's process of loss and grief, and also being with women as they have those experiences.
I'm so thankful for you. It makes me think of hospice, which makes me want to cry because they were so important to me when my mom and dad were dying. And I can't believe that there's people in the world who will do that.
I think a lot of hospice and death doula work should be an and. You should have both, because I'm not medically caring for or assisting the person who is dying. That's not appropriate for me. I won't administer medications. But what I will do is meet with the person who is dying and their closest loved ones, as is appropriate, and say, okay, the prognosis is 8 weeks, 12 weeks. In the same way that mothers create a birth and labor plan, what is our end of life plan? Is it important to you that your children are in the room? Would you like to be touched? If so, how? Would you like a window open? Is it important for you to be outside? There's so many people who say, I do not want to be in a hospital gown. You better find something else to stick on me. It's really important that somebody comes in and does my hair every day. Conversations with estranged brothers, children. How can we make this labor of death and dying beautiful? It's really an honor to hold that space. It's really a sacred energy in a holy place. And so to be able to empower the loved ones where they're not having to think about, okay, well, who do I have to call now? That's what the doula does. Well, you don't have to worry about that. You just be there with your dad. You just be there. Dad said he really likes it when someone's placing a hand on his chest. Well, you just do that, and I'll make the call to the hospice nurse because it looks like maybe he needs a little more pain meds or something. You don't do that. The conversation around, do you want to die at home? What could or should that look like? Do you want people to sit vigil in your last moments? And to educate not only the person who is dying, but also the loved ones around what the normal stages of dying look like, because that is also something we don't talk about either. Oh my gosh, he stopped eating or he stopped drinking. Should we feed him? We don't need to feed him because he doesn't need fuel to live. Mm-hmm. He's dying. It's really interesting because as a society, we're okay when the senior age dog or cat chooses to stop eating and drinking. We seem to understand. But when it's your mother or your cousin, you go, oh, well, he hasn't taken a sip of water. Well, right, because he's dying. And that's natural.
When my mom was dying in her last hours, my stepfather was on one side of her and a lady that was helping take care of her was on the other. I'm 18 years old and the stepfather is saying, hold on, hold on. And the other lady saying, it's okay to die. It's okay to die. I'm glad somebody was telling her now that somebody was telling her it's okay to go. She was dying.
The last few years have really been very eye-opening. Right as I was working towards getting that death doula certification, my dad is diagnosed with a pretty aggressive leukemia. 3 days after my birthday in September of 2019, while I'm in the middle of going through this curriculum. So just receiving that news and what does that mean? 2 months later, my grandfather dies 3 days before my graduation. So I'm actively grieving.
Learning about grieving.
It was really intense. But gosh, what a blessing for me, because I'm like actively grieving and I'm in a room with 30 death doulas. Like, if ever you had an opportunity to do that. So that happened. Then beginning of January 2020, where am I in my life and what are my goals looking forward? And with all of that going on, I just really could not shake how unhappy I was in the day-to-day work as a lawyer. I don't think that was new. I didn't wake up January 1st, 2020 and say, well, I hate this. But I don't know that I was willing to give myself permission to say it out loud for a long time. And finally, I just, you feel so strongly about something, it's just about bursting at your seams. So January 1st, I'm having breakfast with my husband at the kitchen table and just start crying. And I'm like, I can't do this anymore. This isn't going to work for me. Having watched my 93-year-old grandfather come to his last months and days and weeks and the last few years even, and start expressing these regrets and lamentations over opportunities not taken or choices not made or for other people or societal pressure even. And he was a very successful businessman, but still, when he got to the end of his life, still felt so unfulfilled because there were passions inside him that he did not choose. As strongly as he felt about that, those were similar sentiments and values that he passed on to my mother. And now in her final third of her life, starting to feel the seeds of that kind of regret and lamentation. And I said, shit, the pattern has to stop. Like it's enough. It's enough. And we're getting off this train, because I'll be damned if I raise 2 daughters to choose a path because they think they're supposed to.
You told me once that you became a lawyer because they told you should be a lawyer.
The family message was, well, you could go to law school or you could go to med school. Just did not even occur to me to consider plan C. Just didn't. And since I'm just awful at numbers, well, I guess I'm going to law school. I just wasn't going to do another 30, 40, whatever years kicking this can around. I feel like I honored my family. I did the thing. I'm retiring.
How did your husband respond to you saying, this is not what I want to do anymore?
Oh my gosh, he cried with me, tears of joy. He said, God, it's about time.
So I got to photograph your husband for one of my series, and, he's a real Renaissance man. And I have talked to you before, and your lovely connection with him, or a lovely, you guys partner well together. You're intentional about your partnership. Do you want to talk a little bit about your husband and that kind of stuff?
November will be our 10-year anniversary. And early on, we made a decision that we would keep dating, and not just hey, let's go out to the movies or whatever, but, really spend quality time asking each other the same sort of questions that you do when you first meet someone and you're first courting them. I want to still know him. I don't read his mind. I'm not sharing those thoughts and the fears and the joys that evolve that he experiences over time. And I'm still very interested to know those things. So we go to retreats together. We go on, long weekends or vacations together. And we try to do 2 or 3 of those a year. And they're not necessarily extravagant, but it's just time for us to unplug. And we know the kids are safe with their caretakers. And, we just hang out. And most of the time we just, do really dumb things, like stay up all night and watch movies and eat cereal, like the sugariest cereal ever. We have a music room in the house. So if we've sent the kids away on one of our date weekends, we'll like play music or sing karaoke, or, we don't always need to go somewhere, but it's just spending meaningful time. And we have a concerted interest to always be working to support each other. He's my best friend. The love languages, the 4 love languages, right?
Yeah. There's 5. You might only like 4 of them, but there is 5.
There's 5. So for him, just being mindful as I go through my day, what's important for him. Words of affirmation are important for him. Physical touch is important for him. When I send him little notes through the day, or, give him a little pat on the rear, that's awesome. For me, it's one of them is quality time. And so having these little times away like that fuels me to get to the next time where we can have some downtime together when we're not focused on our children or our businesses or the dog.
I'm so lucky to have a husband who's a friend. My job, I feel like, is to build my husband up and to make sure he knows how loved he is and how he's doing great. Are you willing to discuss your religion?
Sure.
Okay, because you secretly once told me you were Jewish.
Well, I'm not.
What are you not?
My mother's family is Jewish. Yeah. My father's family is Catholic. I, for the first 10 years of my life, went to a very religious, Jewish, small private school, like Orthodox to the nines. My parents divorced like a year later after that. And Dad went on to do his religious thing, and Mom went on to do her, I'm going to say, more cultural than religious.
Yeah, I get that.
And as I aged, I determined that I'm not really for that dogma. And it's interesting because at my core, I deeply respect and value ritual and tradition, regardless of its source, even to the extent of making your own for yourself within your, immediate nuclear family. But I think things should be marked and celebrated. I also, in that discovery and as I've grown, have really, really aligned with the natural elements of things, this universal idea of I'm simply here as a being of energy, child of the universe. I am a piece of all of these things. And to me, it's all espousing the same message of love. And we can get around the table at the spring equinox and, the winter solstice, and we can call it Easter, or we can call it Passover, or we can call it, 100 different things. I'm all for it. I'm for all of it. I personally don't feel like I'm being hypocritical. I'm very mindful of the words that I choose. Whenever it has to do with sharing food, being with people you love, communicating and expressing appreciation and gratitude, all of the things that really matter, I'm all for it. So I don't identify as Jewish or Christian, but I do also feel really lucky that I've had such a multi-religious, multicultural experience, because most people have not. Where it's really offered me a robust experience is in recognizing that it's the same. Everybody's saying the same thing.
Oh, I love that. I was raised by 2 non-practicing Jews. I feel Jewish, like you're saying, culturally. I feel like I'm Jewish in that way. I said something on Facebook a long time ago. I don't always share that I'm Jewish because there are still people who don't like Jews, even though I'm not practicing. Like, they just don't like me because my heritage is Jewish. There's still not a shame attached, but a stigma. It is as crazy as not liking somebody for the color of their skin.
100%. It goes even farther than that. So along the same lines, we sort of call it the witch wound. How crazy of me to have these visions about, being a servant of the angel of death. That's a little ridiculous. Or that I like crystals, that I follow the moon cycle, that I sage a space when I come into a new place to make the energy my own. I mean, if we said these things years ago, they'd haul you out to the plaza in the square and they'd hang you. And it's that same feeling for non-majority folks of whatever class or space or demographic.
Do you feel like you'll be judged if people know?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I think so. But I also think that you attract the people you're supposed to attract, and those who judge you are just not your tribe. Do you think that's true also?
I do. And I think to myself, well, it was one thing when I didn't have children. It sort of offers another layer of, they become at once the thing I protect and the thing I hide behind.
Explain that.
As a mother, you want nothing more but to, as best we can, ensure the safety and happiness and well-being of your children. But on the other hand, our children can so very easily become the easy excuse for us to not pursue things or not grow and use them as the excuse. Well, if I come out and talk about my witchiness, my woo, it might hamper their safety. It might interfere with their reputation that would have nothing to do with them or their own actions, but all to do with me. That's not fair. So I'll just keep myself to myself.
So you are coming out. I outed you just now.
Thank you. Because I've been working towards that.
And you're standing in your power. You are magical in all the things you do. And these are your talents and what make you so powerful and beautiful. And to hide them because somebody might judge you is so sad, really.
Oh, it's absolutely sad. And then I think it goes on to asking, the next question of myself, which is, if I knew 20 years from now that my child kept a very important part of her a secret because she didn't think it would be accepted by me, by our family, by society, how would that make me feel? Ridiculous. That would feel terrible, like the worst thing I could possibly do. Well, if I'm not living that truth, my child needs to see that courage.
You do have to be open to everything and be willing to live like who you are supposed to be instead of what you think other people want you to be. It's such nonsense that we would even allow ourselves to go one day like that.
But, we do.
I spent a lot of years not being true to myself and not accepting myself. And now I'm just like, man, I'm the bomb.
I came to the realization that thank you is the most powerful prayer you could utter. If you have no other words, I think thank you is a complete prayer.
Yeah. This is a Hawaiian prayer. I can't remember how to say it. I'm sorry. Please forgive me. Thank you. I love you.
That's the whole thing.
I love that. I think it is the whole thing.
Yes. And it's so powerful also to say to somebody else at death, when you're saying goodbye. But I had that ritual with my dad 5 months ago or so. And we've had a really challenging relationship. It's really been hard. And it was hard for me to say those 4 things.
Do you forgive him?
I do forgive him. And that really is so liberating.
Yeah. Do you understand him? Do you understand his choices?
Not all of them. I think that would be untrue of me to say. I don't think we can always know anyone's motivations for things.
But I mean, in your forgiveness of him, do you see it at all more from his perspective of maybe why he made the choices he made? Because you have more of a lightness towards him? Or is that not true? Am I putting words in your mouth?
Well, it's interesting because I think what I was going to say was I feel empathy, but to the extent that the full envelopment of empathy means that I could put myself in his shoes, I don't know that I can. Because when I think to myself some of his choices as it related to me as a young child, as an adolescent, as a young adult, I don't get it. Now as a parent, I cannot possibly imagine how that was even in like the field of options.
I understand what you're saying.
But I forgive him because the forgiving of him really doesn't have anything to do with him.
Right. My mother was mad at her father her whole life. And years after he died, she was so glad to finally forgive him and have a softness towards him in the choices that he made. He had remarried and the stepmother wasn't kind to her, but he was a single dad with 2 kids and needed somebody to care for his kids. She just could see it as a single mom, finally years later, struggling, taking care of kids. I think it's interesting how the more we parent, the more our parents seem less confusing and we forgive them more. I think about myself that I'm just this girl who had a kid. Like, what the heck do I know? My mother was definitely that lady. And so for me to hold her to this crazy standard that she should have done all these things the way I needed her to, she got married when she was 15. I just think that as we get older and we parent, I think if you are a parent, you really understand your parents more, especially as you age.
I think for me, the hardest phrase in that prayer, in that ritual, was "I'm sorry."
Saying it to him?
So I didn't actually have the ritual to him. He's not someone who has the desire or capacity to have these deep conversations. I had it in the energy field. Like I had the ritual with him and I feel very strongly that like his soul heard me, but I did not have the conversation with his physical self.
I understand that.
Gosh, it took me hours to get to "I'm sorry" because I'm just so fucking mad. Mm-hmm. I don't know you and I'm sorry. You deserved all those shitty things I said to you through the years. Mm-hmm. I think that was the hardest for me. And when I finally was able to say "I'm sorry" and then say the whole, all 4 phrases together, I was really forgiving myself.
Yeah.
Fuck, I was 15, I was 12, I was, all of these young ages, ill-equipped for the situations that I was being presented with, and no supportive being to honor the feelings I was having. So yeah, I was mad. Yeah, I said some really fucked up things, but that's okay that I did that.
I'm so glad actually that you spoke your truth, whether it was hard for him to hear or not. How old are your kids?
8 and 6.
What are they into?
Well, right now they're into selling a lot of Girl Scout cookies.
I could use some Thin Mints. My butt could really go for that.
That's right. A frozen sleeve from the freezer. Yes. So they're into that. The little one loves all things fairies, unicorns, magic kingdoms, make-believe. I mean, she will get lost for hours and I just love it. I love it for her.
Me too. I'm jealous, actually.
I know. And you know what else I just love about it is that we've created a family, a household where she doesn't feel shame or embarrassment if she's overheard while playing. That's cool.
I love that.
Yeah. And so to just be like fully in there and be her whole self, bring her whole self to the place. The bigger one, she'll be 9 in June. She's such a spirit. I often am not sure that she's quite all human. I think she's probably half angel and somehow ended up here. But I do think that some of her is still floating around in the heavens. She's very artistic and into nature. She's a very, very sensitive soul. Like she feels all the energy in the room and just sucks it all up. And that can be really overwhelming for her to absorb all of that. And so supporting her to say, don't have those feelings, or, you're kind of overreacting or whatever, but to say, well, I understand. I see that you're feeling sad because your sister has a sad, but here's how you can work with that so that you don't internalize everything the next person is experiencing. But it's really been interesting in the last several weeks because I've noticed we've moved into the early stages of changing and hormones joining on board. And wow, that's so interesting. What a cool opportunity as a woman to welcome a little girl into the tribe of womanhood. I crawled into bed with her one morning and, I said, okay, well, today's the day. I'm going to tell you all about the transition from being a girl to being a woman. And she has not started her cycle yet, but I'm seeing changes, and I don't want her to be like so many friends and other women that I know who just, there was no conversation. There was nothing. It was horrific. I mean, friends that I have who just thought they were dying.
I had no idea what it meant to have my period and how to take care of it.
I don't think a lot has changed, frankly.
Yeah.
And I wish for something different. So my mom is a nurse, and I knew from kindergarten where babies came from. I knew all the appropriate names of the anatomy for genders and, and all of that. And it was not a surprise to me when I got my period. The only part I wish I'd had that wasn't offered was the emotional and psychological component. I felt very equipped from a biological standpoint. So what I envision, I'm like planning for Chloe, is to honor that, let's celebrate, and not all right, well, let's go buy you razors to shave your legs. No, but I mean, on that first day, and maybe it's on the first day every month until I get tired of it or she tells me to fuck off, but I would like to draw her a bath and put in some lovely oils and rub her feet and welcome her in a way that's really welcoming.
Your kids are so lucky to have you guys as parents. It's really beautiful. I wasn't that good of a mom. Good Lord, I'm never drawing anybody a bath. Just so not going to happen. I'm not the service kind of girl.
Yeah. I mean, but that's one of my love languages, acts of service, right? So
I like it. I just don't want to do it. That's one of my love languages too. Somebody should draw me a bath.
And I also look forward to Chad, my husband, also not being like the stereotypical dad of girls who's like, oh, I don't want to hear about that. What I want to change the narrative of is this idea that our womanness is a pain in the ass, or is a distraction, or is dirty, or is anything other than my body is doing the thing it's supposed to do in its best, natural, loving way.
I mean, I'm just there, but I'm 53. I wouldn't hide a tampon to walk to the bathroom now, but I sure did the majority of my life. Now I'm just like, but I have my period, whatever. Actually, now I don't have my period now that I'm finally okay with it.
And well, I think that's an important transition too. And I'm going to be 40. I have no idea what's next. Nobody talks about that. I don't have any idea what's normal. And I don't want a doctor to tell me, oh, you're feeling this way. Well, here's a medicine, or here's a thing. This should turn off. I would like to embrace all the things, and I want to have healthy, loving conversation with other women to embrace that next chapter. I look forward to being a crone.
I have this conversation often now with girlfriends saying that there's no conversation about menopause. And so one girlfriend said there are Facebook groups that she's learned a lot from. So if you do want to go the anonymous route of Facebook groups, but it is hard to talk about because in the middle of a business meeting, I walked out into the winter air to cool off because I was just like, I'm going to melt. I wish it wasn't, but it's embarrassing.
Well, it's embarrassing because it's not been normalized. We're supposed to hide it.
It doesn't feel sexy.
Right. It's not sexy. Are you losing your sheen because you've stopped bleeding? Meanwhile, you told me for the whole middle part of my life that I was bleeding, that was nasty. When is it ever okay to be me, to be a woman?
Yeah, the humanness is hard, but it is so beautiful also. I am so grateful that I'm aware of every gift that I have, the body that I have, every experience I have. I have a tree in this house. Luckily, every year it comes back in the middle of the summer and the leaves twinkle in the sun and they blow in the breeze. It is the most magical tree. I feel so lucky to have the tree in my view. This is how you started this conversation off, talking about joy. If we can just be appreciative of what we have and look for joy, instead of looking for what we don't have and all the things that have gone wrong, our life can go in a different way.
Yes.
If you had to gift a book to somebody, what book would you gift?
One book?
Yeah, one. What's the one?
It would be The Four Agreements.
Oh, that's a good one.
Because everything else comes back to that for me.
It so does.
And I read that book annually.
I'm so proud of myself because I've stopped taking things personally, but for the longest time, I didn't know how to. I love that book. I love those things because it really is the answer to a peaceful life. Or as Toni Morrison, I think, said, you got to give up the shit that's weighing you down or something like that. It's all bullshit, really.
So much bullshit.
Well, this has been lovely.
Thanks for giving me some space to cry and come out in front of people. That's fun.
Are you okay with all of that?
Oh, yes, I'm fine. Happy 40th and fabulous to me.
Yes. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being here and we'll talk soon. And thank you for listening. To subscribe to the podcast, check out our other episodes, and to keep up to date, head to seebeneathyourbeautiful.com. See you next week.